are reports that you punched the director. Was it a right hook or a left hook?
Do you work for the tabloids or the News of the World?
Not at all. I just said there are reports.
National Enquirer? Are you wearing a jockstrap or what?
I'm not tonight, sir.
That's why you're smiling.
Sean Connery, the rugged Scottish actor who became the world's first iconic James Bond, was celebrated for charm, strength, and cinematic brilliance. Admired on red carpets and immortalized on screens across the globe, he commanded respect, fame, and fortune few could imagine.
Is it fun coming back, laid off for 12 years, and to come back and pick up the Bond role?
Well, it was a bit arduous because I hadn't anticipated so many sort of hassles with the production. I just realized that when I started Bond, you started your show.
But 6 years after his death, whispers of personal controversies, secret relationships, and shocking allegations have resurfaced, challenging the spotless legend of 007. So, how much of the man behind the tuxedo was truly known? And what dark truths have emerged now, years later? This is the story. Reassessing the legend of Sean Connery. When Sean Connery passed away in October 2020 at the age of 90, the world paused to honor one of cinema's most unforgettable figures. Known globally as the very first James Bond, Connery wasn't just an actor. He was a cultural phenomenon. Tributes came pouring in from every corner of the globe. Fans, fellow actors, filmmakers, and even political figures praised his charisma, his commanding presence, and the way he transformed a fictional spy into a figure of cool danger and charm. From the streets of Edinburgh, where he grew up, to Hollywood's red carpets, his influence had touched generations. Yet, as the initial wave of mourning subsided, the conversations surrounding Connery began to take on a more complex tone. Admiration for his talent and accomplishments remains undeniable, but over time, a quieter, more critical examination has emerged. Interviews, autobiographical claims, and long-buried controversies that once seemed minor or speculative are being revisited and re-examined through the lens of modern audiences. Questions are being raised about his off-screen behavior, personal relationships, and remarks that once went largely unquestioned. It is not uncommon for public figures to be remembered in layers. First as the person the world sees, then as the human being behind the fame, and finally as a mix of both, complete with flaws and contradictions. Connery's story exemplifies this duality. On one hand, he remains the iconic 007, the man whose voice, stature, and smoldering gaze defined a generation of cinema and inspired countless imitators. On the other hand, some whispers and claims complicate the legend, details that were known to some but rarely discussed openly during his lifetime. This growing conversation doesn't necessarily seek to diminish Connery's accomplishments or tarnish his reputation. Rather, it reflects a cultural shift in how we think about our heroes, acknowledging that even those we hold in the highest regard may have shadows in their past. 6 years after his death, Sean Connery continues to be celebrated, debated, and analyzed, a figure who embodies both enduring admiration and the ongoing intrigue of the secrets behind the man. In many ways, this is what makes him endlessly fascinating. The line between the cinematic legend and the private individual, between the public icon and the human being, is not always clear. And now, more than half a decade after he passed, those lines are being explored in ways that keep his story alive, compelling, and deeply human. Sean Connery, famously known for his role as James Bond, passed away at the age of 90. While many celebrated a cinematic legend, the controversies surrounding his life and persona cannot be overlooked. But what exactly sparked these controversies? Were they limited to his on-screen actions, or did they extend into his private life as well? Let's uncover the astonishing details. The interviews that continue to spark debate. Over the decades, Sean Connery's words in interviews have continued to capture attention. Not always for the reasons fans might hope. In archived conversations from 1965 and later in 1993, the actor made remarks about relationships, gender dynamics, and physical confrontation that raised eyebrows at the time. While many viewers focused on his charm and wit, others took note of comments that, when revisited today, feel controversial and difficult to reconcile with his public image as the suave, unflappable James Bond. In recent years, as audiences have gained more access to old interviews and archival footage, those remarks have resurfaced. Social media, retrospective articles, and documentary segments have reignited discussion around Connery's statements, prompting debate among fans, journalists, and cultural commentators. What once might have been dismissed as casual conversation or offhand bravado is now being analyzed under a modern lens, where public figures are held accountable for what they say, even decades later. Yet it's important to note that Connery himself later clarified his position. He explicitly stated that he did not believe abuse of women was ever justified, emphasizing that earlier comments should not be seen as condoning violence. Supporters argue that context is critical. His words reflected a different cultural moment, one in which social norms, humor, and the language of masculinity were framed differently than they are today. Critics, however, maintain that regardless of era, certain remarks can still carry weight and influence public perception. This tension between admiration for Connery's talent and concern over some of his words illustrates the complexity of evaluating historical figures. Connery remains a beloved icon whose contributions to cinema are undeniable. Yet these interviews remind us that even the most celebrated individuals may have said things that spark debate when viewed through a contemporary lens. Ultimately, the conversations around these interviews are not about rewriting Connery's legacy or erasing his achievements. Instead, they reflect a broader cultural shift in how society re-examines the past, balancing appreciation for remarkable talent with a critical understanding of the statements and behaviors that shaped public perception. Decades after being recorded, these words continue to challenge, intrigue, and spark reflection, adding layers to the story of a man who was both larger than life on screen and fully human off it. Sean Connery's controversial comments about physical confrontation with women were re-examined after his passing, raising questions about his attitude toward women. But were his words merely statements, or did they reflect real actions? And who brought these allegations to light for the world to know? Let's find out. Allegations from a former spouse. In 1962, Sean Connery married Australian actress Diane Cilento, a union that drew significant attention from both the media and fans around the world. The couple had one son together, Jason, and for a time, their life seemed to balance family, work, and the growing pressures of Hollywood fame. Connery's rising stardom as James Bond added both glamour and scrutiny to their marriage, placing the relationship under a constant spotlight that few couples could navigate with ease. However, by the early 1970s, cracks began to appear. Connery and Cilento separated, and in 1973, their marriage officially ended in divorce. While public records mark these dates with straightforward facts, the details of their private life have long been a subject of speculation, discussion, and occasional controversy. Years later, in 2006, Diane Cilento published her autobiography, My 9 Lives, in which she made personal claims about their marriage. She described experiences of emotional and physical mistreatment, revealing moments that she said had deeply affected her life and their family dynamic. These allegations reignited public interest in a period of Connery's life that had previously remained largely private, sparking debate among fans, journalists, and cultural commentators. It is important to note that Sean Connery consistently denied any wrongdoing. Throughout his life, he maintained that the allegations did not reflect reality. Legal proceedings were never initiated, and no criminal charges or convictions resulted from Silento's claims. The allegations, while part of the public record through published works and media coverage, remain unproven in any formal legal sense. This aspect of Connery's personal history illustrates the complexity of evaluating a public figure's life. On one hand, he is celebrated worldwide as a cinematic icon whose portrayal of James Bond set a standard for action, charisma, and screen presence. On the other hand, the public record contains personal claims that cannot be fully verified, leaving a nuanced picture of his private life. In the end, these claims exist alongside his professional achievements, forming part of the broader story of Sean Connery as both a legendary actor and a human being with a complex, sometimes contradictory life. While his films continue to captivate audiences, discussions of his personal life remind us that public figures are multidimensional, and even the most celebrated can have chapters of their story that spark debate and reflection decades later. Connery's wife, Diane Cilento, alleged that she experienced physical abuse during their marriage, which ultimately ended in divorce. But did Connery ever try to reconcile with her? Or did he move on to other women? And after the divorce, did he remain faithful to a single partner? Now, let's dive into Sean Connery's dazzling and drama-filled romantic journey, Hollywood romances and rivalries. After his divorce from Diane Cilento, Sean Connery's personal life became as much a topic of fascination as his film career. No longer bound by the responsibilities of marriage, Connery found himself navigating Hollywood's glamorous, and sometimes turbulent, dating scene. He was linked with several high-profile actresses, including Jill St. John, Lana Wood, and Magda Konopka, relationships that captured media attention and added a layer of intrigue to his off-screen persona. These romances offered a glimpse into the private life of an actor whose screen presence had already captivated audiences worldwide. During the filming of Diamonds Are Forever in 1971, Connery's romantic choices reportedly stirred extra drama. Sources suggest that he was involved with more than one co-star at the same time. While the details remain personal and unverifiable, the reports sparked tension on set and contributed to a long-running feud between two of the actresses involved. Though the feud itself became a talking point in Hollywood circles, it also reinforced the image of Connery as a man whose charm and charisma extended far beyond the camera lens. These relationships, real or rumored, became a defining aspect of Connery's public persona during the peak of his fame. Fans, journalists, and Hollywood insiders were drawn to the combination of mystery, magnetism, and mischievous allure that seemed to follow him wherever he went. To many, Connery's off-screen romances were an extension of the suave, confident characters he portrayed on film, larger-than-life figures who inspired both admiration and envy. Yet behind the headlines and gossip columns, Connery remained a complex individual navigating the pressures of fame, personal desire, and public scrutiny. His relationships were entwined with the image he projected. Still, they also reflected the realities of Hollywood in the early 1970s, a world where talent, appearance, and charm could create opportunities, attract attention, and sometimes lead to friction among colleagues. Ultimately, these romances are a reminder that Connery's life was never just about the movies. While he became immortalized as James Bond and other iconic roles, the glimpses into his personal affairs reveal the man behind the legend, a figure both celebrated and scrutinized. whose charisma on screen was matched by the magnetic, sometimes controversial aura he carried off it. In many ways, Connery's romantic life reflected the excitement, drama, and complexity of the Hollywood world he inhabited. But what shaped his approach to love and attraction? Could his childhood experiences have influenced the way he captivated women? Let's uncover the devastating details. The early seductions. Sean Connery's charm with women was not something that appeared suddenly with fame. It was a trait that seemed to run through his life from a very young age. Long before he became the world's most recognizable spy, Connery had already begun exploring his attraction to women. Experiences that would shape his confidence, his persona, and his early understanding of romance. In candid accounts later in life, the actor revealed that he lost his virginity at just 14 years old, an unusually young age that marked the beginning of his formative encounters with intimacy. Sean Connery's first romantic experience came at an unexpectedly young age, with an older woman serving in the Auxiliary Territorial Service, the women's branch of the British Army during World War II. For the teenage Connery, it was intense, eye-opening, and deeply formative. This early encounter introduced him to the tangled world of emotions, physical attraction, and human connection. The lessons he learned during this time left a lasting mark, shaping the way he approached relationships throughout his adult life. While some might be shocked by the early age at which he began exploring intimacy, it also paints a picture of a young man who was bold, curious, and already carrying a magnetic energy that would later define his personal and public life. These early experiences gave Connery a sense of confidence and charm that became integral to the man audiences would one day know on screen. His understanding of attraction, seduction, and presence was not merely learned in Hollywood. It had its roots in his teenage years in Edinburgh, in a world where war, work, and life lessons arrived all at once. Connery's early encounters also hint at how complex his personal life would become. He was a man comfortable with his masculinity and charm, yet also shaped by the environment around him, from the tough streets of his hometown to the structured discipline of wartime Britain. These experiences, some private and formative, others public and celebrated, combined to create a man who exuded confidence, magnetism, and an almost cinematic allure that would captivate audiences round the globe. Ultimately, Connery's beginnings with romance were not just personal milestones. They were part of the story of a young man growing into a presence so magnetic that decades later he would become a legend, both on screen as James Bond and off-screen as a figure whose charisma, relationships, and personal adventures captivated the world. Connery's teenage experiences with women helped shape his bold and confident approach to relationships. But was this dark side of him limited to romance alone, or did it extend into other areas of his life as well? Let's find out. Political battles and life abroad. Sean Connery's life off-screen was never without controversy, and his political views added yet another layer to the public's fascination with him. A proud Scot, Connery openly supported the Scottish National Party and expressed his belief in Scotland's right to self-govern. Over the years, he spoke of his hope for an independent and prosperous Scotland, advocating for the cause both financially and publicly. For Connery, his heritage was more than a matter of pride. It was a guiding principle that shaped his worldview and actions. Sean Connery's choice to spend much of his life outside the United Kingdom drew widespread attention and criticism. Many observers and media outlets labeled him a tax exile, implying that his moves were motivated mainly by money. While Connery was always open about his political opinions, this label sparked debates about the responsibilities of prominent public figures, especially those with considerable wealth, who are connected to their home country. His lifestyle choices raised questions about loyalty, civic duty, and how fame and fortune can sometimes clash with public expectations. Adding fuel to the public discussion, Spanish authorities investigated a property transaction linked to Connery's former residence in Marbella. The case drew headlines, intensifying speculation about his financial affairs. Yet, despite the scrutiny, Connery himself was fully cleared by the authorities. Some associates connected to the transaction faced legal proceedings, but the star himself remained free of any criminal charges. The episode became a talking point in the press, highlighting both the challenges celebrities face when managing wealth internationally and the fine line between public curiosity and legal accountability. These events, while controversial, did not overshadow Connery's larger legacy as an actor and cultural icon. Instead, they added complexity to his public image, reminding audiences that his life was multifaceted, combining global stardom with deeply held political convictions and personal choices that occasionally attracted scrutiny. Connery's financial and political decisions sparked conversations that went beyond entertainment, touching on issues of national loyalty, fiscal responsibility, and the power of celebrity influence. Ultimately, Connery's support for the SNP and his residence outside the UK are part of the broader story of a man whose life was lived fully, publicly, and often on his own terms. These incidents continue to provoke discussion, not because of criminal wrongdoing, but because they reveal the tensions between fame, personal beliefs, and the expectations placed on a world-famous figure whose influence extended far beyond the silver screen. Beyond the speculation of some critics who suggested that Connery's life abroad was a tactic to evade taxes, does his real personality truly reflect the man he portrayed on screen? Now, let's explore the man behind 007. Untangling Sean Connery's screen legend from the real person. Sean Connery was not just any actor. He was the James Bond for a generation. From the moment he first stepped onto the screen in Dr. No, Connery embodied a suave, confident, and commanding presence that would define the role for decades to come. With a steely gaze, effortless charm, and unmistakable charisma, he set the standard for every actor who would later take on the iconic spy. But while audiences celebrated his on-screen dominance, Connery's larger-than-life persona sometimes blurred the line between character and man in the eyes of the public. Over the years, some commentators and critics have asked whether Connery's association with James Bond affected how people viewed him off-screen. When controversial remarks or personal allegations surfaced, his reputation as a suave, unflappable, and masculine figure seemed to amplify the reactions. For some, it became difficult to separate the daring, risk-taking spy from the real man behind the roles. His powerful Bond persona had created an aura of mystery and intensity that shaped public expectations and judgments. At the same time, many argue that viewing Connery solely through the lens of James Bond can be misleading. Behind the tuxedo, the martini, and the daring stunts, there was a human being with complexities, contradictions, and personal challenges. Evaluating his legacy requires distinguishing between the fictional, idealized hero audiences admired on screen and the real-life actor navigating fame, privacy, and public scrutiny. His choices, statements, and actions must be understood in the broader context of a career spent in the global spotlight, often under immense pressure. Connery's screen presence also influenced his opportunities and limitations as an actor. While the Bond films catapulted him to international fame, they also created expectations that followed him into every project. Directors, co-stars, and audiences often projected the qualities of James Bond onto Connery himself, sometimes amplifying praise, other times magnifying criticism. This duality, a man forever linked to a fictional icon, is a key part of understanding both his cinematic achievements and the controversies that periodically surrounded him. Ultimately, Sean Connery's legacy is inseparable from the persona he created on screen, yet it cannot be fully defined by it. His contribution to film, his style, his presence, and his influence on pop culture are immense. But the man himself was more nuanced, more human, and more complex than even the most daring spy he portrayed. Separating the legend from the individual allows us to appreciate both the genius of his performances and the layered reality of his life beyond the screen. At times, Connery was celebrated for his iconic performances, while at other times, he faced criticism for being unapologetically himself. But what ultimately drove him to leave the movie industry? Where did he spend his final years? And what personal struggles did he face during that time? Now, let's explore the final curtain: retirement and quiet retreat. Sean Connery, the man who had defined a generation of cinema with his commanding presence, ultimately decided to step away from the silver screen in the mid-2000s. After decades of portraying some of the most memorable and celebrated characters in film history, most famously James Bond, Connery had grown weary of the pressures and politics of Hollywood. The glitz and glamour that once drew him in had become a source of frustration. He was no longer interested in navigating the intricate demands of the film industry, where creative vision, personal conflicts, and commercial pressures often collided. The decision to retire was a personal one, reflecting a desire for peace and control over the final chapters of his life. Following his retirement, Connery chose a quieter path, retreating from public life to spend his later years in the Bahamas. Surrounded by the calm of tropical landscapes, the turquoise waters, and the gentle rhythm of island life, he embraced privacy and simplicity, far from the flashing cameras and media scrutiny that had followed him for decades. It was a life that allowed him to reflect on an extraordinary career, savor moments with close friends and family, and simply live away from the constant demands of fame. In the years following Sean Connery's passing in October 2020, his family revealed that the legendary actor had been living with dementia during his final years. This revelation added a deeply human dimension to the story of a man once celebrated for his sharp intellect, quick wit, and magnetic on-screen presence. Away from the flashing cameras and the roar of applause, dementia quietly shaped his daily life, altering routines, memories, and experiences. While the world remembered him as a powerful icon, these private struggles remind us that even legends face vulnerability, fragility, and the unseen battles of the human condition. The official death certificate listed the causes of his passing as pneumonia and respiratory failure, marking the end of a life that had spanned 9 remarkable decades. While the world remembers Sean Connery for his unforgettable roles, his retirement and final years remind audiences that even legends seek solitude, reflection, and dignity away from the spotlight. His story is a testament to the human side of fame, a man who conquered the world of cinema, yet ultimately chose quiet, privacy, and the simple pursuit of peace in the twilight of his life. Connery grew frustrated with the movie industry by the time he retired, and in his later years he faced health struggles. But who was Sean Connery before he became a global movie star? Did his childhood experiences shape the man behind the iconic screen characters? And what path did he take before entering Hollywood? Let's find out. The early life that shaped Sean Connery. Long before Sean Connery became a household name, the man who would one day define James Bond was a working-class boy growing up in the heart of Edinburgh. Life was far from easy for young Sean. Born into a modest family, he quickly learned the realities of hardship. School offered little solace. In fact, Connery left formal education at the tender age of 9. Rather than spending his days in a classroom, he was thrust into the workforce, taking on jobs that demanded grit, stamina, and a maturity far beyond his years. Connery's early life was shaped by long hours of labor and responsibility. He delivered milk through the streets of Edinburgh, worked as a lifeguard, polished coffins, and took on a variety of odd jobs to help his family make ends meet. Each role, no matter how humble, demanded resilience, determination, and the ability to adapt quickly, qualities that would later become the bedrock of his personality and public persona. Even as a young man, Connery was learning lessons in discipline, strength, and resourcefulness that few children of his age were ever exposed to. When he turned 16, he joined the Royal Navy, embracing yet another environment that tested both his physical and mental endurance. The military taught him precision, confidence, and a sense of duty, all while instilling in him a strong sense of personal pride. Though his service was eventually cut short due to medical reasons, Connery carried the discipline and presence he developed in the Navy into every future endeavor. These early experiences, forged in the streets, workplaces, and naval halls of Scotland, had a profound impact on Connery's worldview. Supporters argue that it was his humble beginnings and hard-earned resilience that gave him a grounded, commanding presence, a mix of toughness and charm that made him both relatable and extraordinary. The confidence, resourcefulness, and quiet strength he displayed on screen were not just acting. They were an extension of the life he had lived before Hollywood lights ever touched his face. In hindsight, Connery's formative years reveal the roots of a legend. His working-class upbringing, his early exposure to responsibility, and his time in the Navy all combined to create the unique persona that audiences around the world would one day admire. The boy from Edinburgh, who once delivered milk and labored in tough jobs, had unknowingly begun crafting the very style, poise, and magnetism that would make him an enduring icon of cinema. Connery was a hard-working boy from a young age, leaving school early to help support himself and his family. But after his passing, what will he truly be remembered for? Will his personal controversies overshadow his groundbreaking achievements on screen? Let's uncover the details. A legacy that invites discussion. 6 years have passed since Sean Connery, the man who first brought James Bond to life on the silver screen, passed away at the age of 90. Even now, his presence looms large in public memory, and conversations about his life continue to echo around the world. Connery is remembered as a cinematic icon, a man whose performances defined an era and shaped the very image of the suave, fearless secret agent. His talent, charisma, and screen presence remain undisputed, and his films still draw admiration from fans old and new. Yet, as time passes, public discussions about Connery are no longer just about his achievements in film. Critics, historians, and commentators have revisited moments from his life and career that once sparked debate. Interviews from decades ago, remarks he made about relationships and conflict, and personal choices regarding his political views and finances have all resurfaced. While these conversations are not uncovering brand-new scandals or secrets, they have reignited interest in understanding the full picture of who Sean Connery was, not just as James Bond, but as a real person with complexities, contradictions, and a personality that could be as bold off-screen as it was on. Some argue that examining Connery's life now is part of a broader cultural trend. Society is increasingly reflecting on the actions and words of public figures from past generations, considering them through the lens of today's social values. Comments or actions that might once have been brushed aside or seen as typical of their time are now being analyzed more carefully, sometimes sparking new debates about responsibility, influence, and the gap between public persona and private behavior. Connery's fame, power, and visibility make him a particularly compelling subject for such reflection. At the same time, admirers continue to celebrate his extraordinary career, his influence on cinema, and the enduring legacy of the roles he played. The public memory of Sean Connery is layered. He is a beloved figure in film history, a Scottish cultural icon, and a man whose private life and personality continue to invite discussion. The conversation surrounding him now does not diminish the impact of his artistry. Instead, it paints a fuller, more nuanced picture of a man who was as human and complex as the legendary characters he brought to life. 6 years after his passing, Sean Connery's legacy continues to captivate the world. He is remembered with admiration for his unforgettable roles, yet discussions and debates about his life and choices linger. His story reminds us that even the brightest stars of cinema are complex, shaped by both their triumphs on screen and the shadows behind the spotlight. So, what do you really think about Sean Connery's dark secrets? Could they cast a shadow over the legacy of his extraordinary achievements? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.